a very helpful Bible study tool that I use, particularly helpful to those who have a working knowledge of the biblical languages, Greek and Hebrew, but also it's can be a good resource for those who don't know the original languages but can still find some good insight. I call it digging for gold in the scriptures. And the website is called BibleHub.com, and this is what the home page looks like. Now, utilizing this tool, there are others who have posted videos on YouTube and show you how they get into it. First, we begin with looking for the book, chapter, and verse we want. I'm going to go through to find John 3:16, Gospel of John. Here it is. Then there's a wait time to wait for it to refresh. And first thing that shows up is John 1:1. Now I want to go to chapter 3 of the Gospel of John. Click that and wait for it to refresh. And then verse 16. And when John 3:16 shows up, it shows up in several English versions. But we're going to go here to the interlinear. It's interlin, abbreviated in the menu here. I'm going to click on that, wait for it to refresh. And here's John 3:16. Now I'm going to, in a moment, describe what we're looking at here. But if you try to follow along what I'm doing here, you'll find that the refresh rates are really much slower than this video because I cut out a lot of dead time here. I like to look at Scripture in its context. Isolated verses don't serve me well. So let's go back to the Bible Hub homepage again. And what I do is go directly to the interlinear homepage, BibleHub.com/interlinear is the page here. And this is what shows up here. And two links that I will most often use is the interlinear chapters. So I'm going to look at the interlinear chapters of for the Greek New Testament. I'm going to click on that, and you see the refresh rate is much faster. Comes up almost immediately. And I'm going to go to the Gospel of John. Here comes up right away, very nicely. Chapter 3. Now I can scroll on down to verse 16. Here we go. And this is what we were looking at before. The black text in the middle is the Greek text. The orange text below it is the approximate English translation of each Greek word as it's used in its context of the particular verse and chapter. Below that is a bunch of, looks like codes, letters, that give us grammar information. The blue line above the Greek text is an approximate English transliteration or pronunciation, I should say, of the Greek text. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then again, some numbers at the top, which are, look like code. I'm going to pick on one particular word here at the end of this line. I'm going to enlarge it so it can show up more clearly for us. There we go. Put it right in the middle of the screen. This word right here. And the word, this transliteration at the top gives us what we call an approximate English pronunciation of it. Now, how would you want to pronounce this this word right here if you were looking at it? You would say, what, monogyny or something like that? And I hope you don't do that, because that's not how it's pronounced. This word is monogene. And the accent is on the last syllable. That's that little tilde mark there. In the Greek grammar, it's called a circumflex accent, the last syllable. The gamma is equivalent to our letter G. It always has a soft G sound, as in go or get or God. The two vowels in the two syllables that precede it are omicrons. That's the weak O or the short O. And we would not pronounce this part of the phrase as mono, but mono. It has a short O sound like got or God. And this E-looking letter right here is the epsilon, and it has the short E sound as we pronounce it in English. It's the weak E. As in get. And then the final vowel is an eta, and that's the Greek strong E sound. And it does not have the long E sound that we have in English, but rather it has, as in European languages, it has an A sound, as in the word obey or the Spanish name Jose. So this word in the Greek language is pronounced monogene. And in the context of our sentence here, the translation that is offered is only begotten. Now the letters at the bottom here give us information, grammar information. It's an adjective, but the real gold we find up here is in this number. And those of you who are familiar with the Strong's concordance of the Bible, this number correlates with the number that the Strong's concordance assigns to each word in Scripture. And so let's click on that, and we go to another page. Take some time to refresh. Again, we have this transliteration, or this phonetic spelling at the top. But this is its dictionary form, monogenes, as we look it up in the lexicon. It says it's an adjective and gives us some helps in pronouncing it. Just a word on that. If you have not studied the Greek language and been tutored by one who knows the language, but you're finding some interesting, good resources here, be really, really careful about going public with your knowledge, because if you mispronounce these words, you kind of expose your ignorance then more than your knowledge. It kind of perturbs me when I hear people rant about meanings of particular Greek words, how they're used in the New Testament, and all along they're mispronouncing them, exposing they lack the most basic knowledge of the language. So, but nonetheless, we can still get some good information here. Monogenes is a compound word that derives from two words, monos, meaning only, and genos, meaning kind or offspring. We get, we scroll down further here, we find it is derived from the Greek verb genomai, and we click on genomai and see that it means to become, come into being, to be born. And monogenes means the only kind or the only offspring, the only child. It's used in relationship of parents to children. And then anyway, throughout this left-hand column here, we see helpful information about how the word is used in the New Testament, how it's used in the Greek language generally, and what its various nuances can be. In Greek literature outside the New Testament, it can refer to something or a unique creation or a unique creature. Now, this is all Very informative, gives you kind of the source of the word, knowing that it is a compound word such as it is, gives us some insight to it as well. One thing I have to caution on, that I find that some people who use this tool will focus exclusively on the dictionary definitions that they see here, and get upset when they see phrases in translations of the New Testament that digress from what they're reading here as the dictionary definition, ignoring the context of how the word is used in each case. One size does not fit all. In the English language, a word can mean different things in different contexts. For example, the English word table, what does that mean? Is it a piece of furniture? Is it a grid in a document that contains data? Is it a procedural action in a business meeting? Again, context is critically important to understand the meaning of the word as it's being used, as it's intended by the author. And be real careful about setting up your camp strictly on a dictionary definition and ignoring the fuller nuance and context of the word. Now, where I find real treasure here is over on the right side of the screen, in this part called the Englishman's Concordance of the Greek New Testament. And what we have listed here is every single usage of that word as it appears in every sentence of the New Testament. Monogenes occurs only 9 times in the New Testament, and so we have 9 verses listed here. Words that are used a lot. This list that we see here on this page is kind of cut short, is abbreviated, and if we were to click on this link, this non-occurrences link, here we get essentially the same thing, but a full and complete list of all the verses that use this word. So let's look at that and get some insight. Gives us a better insight about the broad spectrum of what monogenes could mean. The first occurrence we find is Luke 7. And we just read this sentence: man was being carried out, the only son. Aha, this is the story of Jesus raising the son of the widow of Nain. And New American Standard translates it, carried out the only son. Monogenes huios, the only son is the Greek phrase here, and that's how it is translated to English. Monogenes, as we saw, was in this verse in John 3:16, and some folks get upset when they see an English translation that does not have it translated God gave his only begotten son, but rather would be translated God gave his one and only son. Somehow they get perturbed that the word begotten is not in the translation. The problem is that English word begotten carries with it a nuance of a father's role in the procreation of his child. Now, this verse is not talking about the relationship of the son with his father, but rather with his mother. And so the word begotten, as we nuance it in the English language, is not applicable in this verse. So we can clearly see that an English translation of John 3:16, God gave his one and only son, is really a perfectly appropriate translation. In my work as a pastor in deaf ministry, interpreters ask me how to translate this word, this phrase, only begotten. And I can tell them that in the Greek it can also mean just the one and only child, one and only offspring. And so just to translate it, God gave his only son, is a perfectly good translation. Now, begs the question, Does it mean this woman had one son, but perhaps she had some daughters as well? And probably not. The only begotten, or this monogenes, carries with it the sense that this is one of a kind, or the only child of the parent. Not that the parent had one child, one son, but any number of daughters. Students of the language can correct me if I'm wrong, but in my studies this seems to be the case. If it was just a only son, but there were other children in the family, daughters, the adjective would be monos rather than monogenes. Okay, so Luke 7:12, the child of the son of the widow of Nain. Luke 8 is the next appearance. We're looking at the story of the raising of Jairus' daughter, and it's refers to her as Thugater monogenes, his only daughter. Again, the nuance is that she was an only child, and she was his daughter. Then Luke chapter 9. We have the story of Jesus coming down from the Mount of Transfiguration with his disciples, Peter, James, and John. The rest of the disciples are in a discussion with a fellow who had a son who was demon-possessed, showed symptoms of severe epilepsy, and the father refers to him as monogenesmoi, my one and only, my only child. So it's just an adjective. And in Greek grammar, when you have an adjective without its noun to modify, he is my one and only, he is my only begotten. That's what we call a substantive adjective that acts as a noun. And this is even more emphatic that this is the only child. In this case, it's we know from context it's a boy, not a girl. Then we get to the Gospel of John, and throughout John, this word monogenes, as it's used in every context, refers only to Jesus, as it does in John 3:16. God gave his huion ton monogene, his only begotten Son. And then Hebrews 11 refers to Abraham offering up his one and only offspring, his only son. It, of course, begs the question, what about Ishmael? But in the context of this story, the only son referred to is Isaac. Ishmael at this point was not part of the family any longer, at least not part of the household, I should say. And then finally, last reference is in 1 John 4 again. He has sent his only begotten, his monogene. Okay, I'm going to follow this up with more videos on other hidden gold that sometimes gets lost in translation. But this is a useful tool, and I hope you find this helpful.